The radio crackled through the pre-dawn darkness of forward operating base Kestrel, interrupting what should have been another routine morning briefing. Colonel Marcus Valdez paused mid-sentence, his weathered face creasing as the transmission cut through the static like a blade through silk. Overwatch 6, this is Phantom 2-1. We have a problem. The voice belonged to Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison, leader of SEAL Team 7's most elite sniper unit. In 15 years of operations across 3 continents, Morrison had never used those words. Problems were obstacles to be eliminated, targets to be neutralized, complications to be managed with surgical precision, but never problems. Valdez exchanged glances with his intelligence officer, Captain Rivera, whose fingers had already moved to the secure communication panel. The briefing room, moments before filled with the casual confidence of seasoned operators preparing for a standard reconnaissance mission, fell into the kind of silence that precedes either triumph or catastrophe. Phantom 2-1, this is Overwatch 6. Send your report. Valdez's voice carried the controlled tension of a commander who had learned to expect the unexpected, but hoped never to receive it. Morrison's response came through fragmented, each word punctuated by the distant crack of rifle fire. Sir, we've been in position for 48 hours. Target building is a 3-story concrete structure, approximately 200 meters from our hide site. Intelligence was solid 12 hostiles, standard patrol rotation, minimal security. Should have been a textbook operation. The pause that followed stretched longer than tactical doctrine recommended. In the world of special operations, silence on the radio meant one of 2 things. Either the operator was dead, or something had gone so fundamentally wrong that even the most experienced professional needed time to process it. Phantom 2-1, continue your report. Sir, we've engaged the target 6 times in the past 18 hours. Clean shots, perfect conditions, confirmed hits on primary targets, but they keep coming back. Same faces, same positions, same patrol patterns. It's like they're— Morrison's voice trailed off, the weight of what he was about to say clearly affecting even his legendary composure. Like they're what, Chief? Like they're ghosts, sir. We've killed some of these men 3 times each, and they keep returning to their posts. Our ammunition is running low, and frankly, sir, my team is starting to question their own sanity. The briefing room erupted in whispered conversations, but Valdez silenced them with a raised hand. In 32 years of military service, spanning conflicts from the Gulf War to the mountains of Afghanistan, he had encountered psychological warfare, sophisticated deception operations, and enemy tactics that pushed the boundaries of conventional understanding. But this was different. This was impossible. Captain Rivera leaned forward, her intelligence officer's mind already processing scenarios. Could be advanced decoy technology, sir. Holographic projections, maybe sophisticated mannequins designed to simulate human movement patterns. But even as she spoke, Rivera's expression betrayed her own doubts. The technology required for such an operation would represent a quantum leap beyond anything in current intelligence assessments. More importantly, it would require resources and sophistication far beyond the capabilities of the local insurgent groups operating in this region. Morrison's voice crackled through again, this time with an edge that suggested his legendary patience was approaching its limit. Captain Lyra, Phoenix Thorn, was 3,000 feet above the confusion, her F-16 Fighting Falcon cutting through the morning sky like a silver arrow seeking its target. She had been monitoring the radio chatter from her patrol route, initially with professional curiosity, then with growing interest, and finally with the kind of focused attention that had earned her both commendation and controversy throughout her 12-year career. The call sign Phoenix had been earned not through some dramatic resurrection narrative, but through her uncanny ability to find solutions in the ashes of failed missions. Where others saw defeat, Thorn saw opportunity. Where conventional tactics failed, she found alternatives that often bordered on the impossible. Her commanding officers had learned to appreciate this quality, even as they struggled to understand it. Thorne's methods were unorthodox, sometimes reckless, frequently brilliant. She had a talent for seeing patterns that escaped others, for finding the single thread that, when pulled, unraveled entire enemy operations. But that same intuition had also earned her a reputation for being difficult to work with, prone to challenging established doctrine, and frustratingly independent in her approach to mission parameters. She was effective, undeniably so, but she was also unpredictable. In a military culture that valued conformity and adherence to established procedures, unpredictability was often viewed with suspicion. As Morrison's increasingly frustrated reports continued to filter through her headset, Thorne found herself studying the tactical display with the intensity of a chess master contemplating a particularly complex endgame. The situation on the ground defied conventional explanation, but there was something about the pattern of reported sightings that triggered her analytical instincts. She keyed her radio, knowing that her intervention would likely be unwelcome, but unable to resist the puzzle that was unfolding below her. Overwatch 6, this is Phoenix 17. Request permission to provide aerial reconnaissance support for Phantom 2-1's operation. The response came not from Colonel Valdez, but from Major Harrison, the mission commander who had made his opinion of female combat pilots abundantly clear on multiple previous occasions. Phoenix 17, maintain your assigned patrol route. Ground operations are outside your mission parameters. Thorne had expected this response. Harrison was old school, a veteran of conflicts where women had been barred from combat roles, and he had never fully adjusted to the changing nature of modern warfare. To him, she represented not just a departure from tradition, but a potential liability in high-stakes operations. But Thorne had also learned to work within the system, even when the system seemed designed to exclude her. Copy that, Overwatch. Phoenix 17 maintaining patrol route. She paused, then added with carefully neutral professionalism. However, my current route provides visual coverage of the target area. If ground units require real-time intelligence updates, I'm positioned to provide them. It was a masterful piece of military diplomacy. She wasn't requesting permission to deviate from orders. She was simply offering to fulfill her existing mission more effectively. The distinction might seem subtle to civilians, but in the rigid hierarchy of military operations, it represented the difference between insubordination and initiative. Colonel Valdez's voice cut through the tension. Phoenix 17, what do you see from your position? Thorne banked her aircraft slightly, bringing the target building into clear visual range. What she saw confirmed her suspicions and raised entirely new questions. The building itself appeared exactly as described in the mission briefing. 3 stories, concrete construction, minimal external security features. But there was something about the movement patterns around the structure that didn't align with Morrison's reports. The figures moving in and around the building weren't behaving like the same individuals being repeatedly engaged and neutralized. They were behaving like a much larger group operating in carefully coordinated shifts. Overwatch 6, I'm seeing movement consistent with a force significantly larger than initial intelligence estimates. Recommend immediate reassessment of enemy strength and tactical approach. Major Harrison's response was predictably dismissive. Phoenix 17, ground reconnaissance has been ongoing for 48 hours. I think our SEAL team has a better understanding of the tactical situation than someone conducting a flyover. But Colonel Valdez had learned to value multiple perspectives, especially when ground operations weren't proceeding according to plan. Phoenix 17, specify your observations. Thorne took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would either validate her reputation for analytical insight or confirm Harrison's opinion of her as an overreaching pilot who didn't understand her place in the operational hierarchy. Sir, from my altitude, I can observe movement patterns across a much wider area than ground-level observation allows. What I'm seeing suggests that Phantom 2-1 may be engaging different individuals who are part of a larger rotating force, rather than the same individuals repeatedly returning to their positions. The radio fell silent. In that silence, Thorne could almost hear the mental recalculations taking place in the command center below. If her assessment was correct, it would mean that the entire mission had been based on flawed intelligence, and that Morrison's team was facing not a dozen insurgents, but potentially dozens more operating in carefully planned shifts. Morrison's voice broke the silence, and for the first time since the operation began, it carried a note of something approaching relief. Phoenix 1-7, can you provide specific intelligence on enemy numbers and positions? This was the moment Thorne had been waiting for, the opportunity to demonstrate that her perspective from the sky could provide tactical advantages that ground observation might miss. But it was also a moment fraught with risk. If she was wrong, her intervention would be remembered as an example of why pilots should stick to flying and leave ground operations to the professionals. Phantom 2-1, I'm observing movement patterns consistent with approximately 40 to 50 individuals operating in rotating shifts of 12 to 15 personnel. Primary building appears to be one of several connected structures, with underground tunnels facilitating movement between positions. The implications of this assessment were staggering. Instead of facing a small insurgent cell, Morrison's team had stumbled onto what appeared to be a significant enemy stronghold, possibly a regional command center or weapons cache facility of far greater importance than original intelligence had suggested. Colonel Valdez's voice carried the weight of command decisions that could affect not just the current mission, but the safety of all personnel involved. Phoenix 1-7, how confident are you in this assessment? Thorne understood the gravity of the question. Military operations lived and died on the accuracy of intelligence, and she was essentially asking the entire command structure to reconsider their tactical approach based on her aerial observations. The wrong call could result in casualties, mission failure, or worse. Sir, based on observable movement patterns, vehicle traffic, and structural analysis, I assess the probability at 90% or higher. Recommend immediate extraction of ground team pending reassessment of enemy capabilities and mission objectives. Major Harrison's response was swift and predictable. Negative, Phoenix 1-7. We don't abort operations based on aerial speculation from unqualified personnel. The word unqualified hung in the air like a challenge. Thorne had heard it before in various forms throughout her career. Sometimes it was delivered with the subtle condescension of officers who questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. Sometimes it came from peers who couldn't reconcile her unconventional methods with established doctrine. But she had learned not to take the bait, not to let emotion compromise her professional judgment. Instead, she responded with the calm professionalism that had earned her the respect of those commanders wise enough to look beyond prejudice and recognize competence. Copy that. Overwatch. Phoenix 1-7 will maintain current position and provide continued reconnaissance support as requested. But even as she spoke, Thorne was calculating. The tactical situation on the ground was deteriorating. Morrison's team was running low on ammunition, and the enemy force was clearly larger and better organized than anyone had anticipated. Standard doctrine would call for reinforcement or extraction, but both options would take time that might not be available. She keyed her radio to Morrison's frequency, bypassing the command hierarchy with the kind of direct communication that was technically permissible but politically risky. Phantom 2-1, this is Phoenix 1-7. What's your assessment of extraction possibilities? Morrison's response was grim. Phoenix, we're in a bad spot. Movement to extraction point would require crossing 600 meters of open ground under direct observation. With enemy numbers at your estimated levels, we'd be walking into a kill zone. Thorne studied her tactical display, overlaying Morrison's position with her own observations of enemy movement patterns. The mathematics of the situation were brutally clear. The SEAL team was effectively trapped, facing a force that significantly outnumbered them and held every tactical advantage except surprise. And even that advantage was rapidly disappearing as the enemy clearly began to understand they were under observation. Phantom 2-1, I may have a solution, but it's going to require close air support authorization and a level of coordination that goes beyond current mission parameters. Morrison's laugh was bitter. Phoenix, at this point I'm open to suggestions. Standard extraction procedures just got us deeper into this mess. Thorne took a deep breath, knowing that her next proposal would either save the SEAL team or end her career. Possibly both. In the command center, Colonel Valdez was facing the kind of decision that defined military careers. The safe choice would be to follow Major Harrison's recommendation, maintain current operations, trust in the superior training and experience of the SEAL team, and avoid the complications that came with deviating from established plans based on the observations of a single pilot. But Valdez had survived 3 decades of military service by learning when to follow doctrine and when to trust his instincts. And his instincts were telling him that Captain Thorne's assessment might be the key to preventing a catastrophic loss of personnel. Major Harrison, I want you to coordinate with intelligence and develop alternative extraction scenarios based on Captain Thorne's enemy strength estimates. Harrison's expression made his opinion clear, but military discipline override personal preferences. Yes, sir. However, I recommend we don't make tactical decisions based on unverified aerial observations. Captain Rivera, the intelligence officer, had been quietly working her own analysis throughout the discussion. Her voice carried the measured tone of someone who had learned to present uncomfortable truths with diplomatic precision. Sir, I've been reviewing communication intercepts from the past 72 hours. There's been a significant increase in encrypted radio traffic in the target area, consistent with a much larger enemy presence than our initial estimates suggested. This was the kind of corroborating evidence that transformed speculation into actionable intelligence. Valdez felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders as the tactical picture shifted from a routine operation to a potential disaster requiring immediate intervention. Phoenix 1-7, I need you to provide detailed intelligence on all enemy positions, movement patterns, and potential tactical vulnerabilities. Phantom 2-1, prepare for possible extraction under fire. Morrison's response was immediate. Copy, Overwatch. My team is ready for whatever comes next. But Thorne's voice carried a different message. Sir, I believe I can neutralize the enemy force without requiring extraction. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes either breakthrough or breakdown. In her F-16, 30,000 feet above the unfolding crisis, Captain Lyra Phoenix, Thorne was about to propose an operation that would challenge everything the military establishment thought they knew about air-ground coordination, tactical innovation, and the capabilities of pilots who dared to think beyond the limitations of conventional doctrine. Major Harrison's response was immediate and predictable. Absolutely not. We don't authorize single aircraft combat missions against unknown enemy forces. Phoenix 1-7, maintain reconnaissance role only. But Colonel Valdez was studying the tactical display with the intensity of a commander who understood that conventional solutions might not be sufficient for unconventional problems. Captain Thorne, explain your proposal. Thorne's voice carried the confidence of someone who had spent years studying the intersection of aerial tactics and ground operations. Someone who understood that modern warfare required flexibility and innovation, rather than rigid adherence to established procedures. Sir, based on my observation of enemy movement patterns, They're operating under the assumption that they're facing a ground-only threat. Their positioning and tactical deployment are designed to counter sniper fire and potential ground assault, but they've left themselves vulnerable to precision airstrikes from specific approach vectors. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. More importantly, the rotation patterns I've observed suggest they're using a centralized command structure. If I can identify and neutralize their command element, the remaining force will likely fragment and withdraw. Captain Rivera's intelligence training immediately grasped the implications. How confident are you in identifying command targets from your altitude? Ma'am, I've been observing their communication patterns for the past 2 hours. There are clear behavioral indicators that distinguish command personnel from standard operatives. Additionally, my aircraft's targeting systems can provide precision strikes that minimize collateral damage while maximizing tactical effectiveness. Major Harrison's objection was swift. This is exactly the kind of cowboy mentality that gets people killed. We don't authorize solo combat missions based on behavioral observations and tactical hunches. But Morrison's voice cut through the debate with the urgency of someone who understood that time was a luxury his team couldn't afford. Phoenix, whatever you're planning, my team can provide ground-based intelligence support. We've been watching these patterns for 48 hours. I think your assessment is correct. Colonel Valdez found himself at the center of a decision that would define not just the success or failure of the current mission, but potentially the entire career trajectory of everyone involved. Standard military doctrine provided clear guidelines for this situation. Call for reinforcements, establish overwhelming tactical superiority, proceed with methodical precision. But standard doctrine also assumed that time was available, that enemy forces were operating according to predictable patterns, and that the tactical situation remained stable while decisions were being made. None of those assumptions applied to the current crisis. Phoenix 1-7, you have authorization for limited tactical intervention. Rules of engagement remain in effect. All strikes must be confirmed through ground observation. You will maintain constant communication with both command and ground personnel. Harrison's objection was immediate. Sir, this sets a dangerous precedent. We're essentially authorizing a single pilot to conduct an independent combat mission based on observational speculation. Valdez's response carried the weight of command authority and the wisdom of experience. Major, we're authorizing a qualified combat pilot to provide close air support for a ground team in immediate danger. That's not precedent. That's what we trained her to do. The distinction was subtle but crucial. Valdez wasn't authorizing Thorne to conduct an independent mission. He was integrating her capabilities into an existing operation that had encountered unexpected complications. It was leadership that valued competence over convention, results over rigidity. Thorne's voice carried professional gratitude mixed with tactical focus. Copy, Overwatch. Phoenix 1-7 moving to attack position. Phantom 2-1, I'll need you to confirm all targets before engagement. Morrison's response reflected both relief and professional respect. Roger, Phoenix, we're ready to coordinate. What happened next would become the subject of tactical analysis seminars for years to come. A case study in how individual initiative and innovative thinking could transform impossible situations into achievable objectives. Captain Lyra, Phoenix, Thorne banked her F-16 into a steep diving turn that brought her aircraft into the precise attack corridor she had been mentally calculating for the past hour. The maneuver was smooth, professional, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who understood the mathematics of high-speed flight at low altitude over hostile territory. Her targeting systems immediately began acquiring the multiple contacts she had identified through her behavioral analysis. The enemy command post, recognizable by its central position, and the movement patterns around it. the communication array that connected the various fighting positions, the supply cache that kept the rotating forces operational. Phantom 2-1, confirmed target designation Alpha. Central building, 3rd floor, southwest corner. Morrison's response came through his spotting scope. Phoenix, target Alpha confirmed. 2 individuals with command-level communication equipment, clear for engagement. Thorne's finger moved to the weapon release, but her mind was calculating far beyond the immediate tactical situation. This moment represented not just a combat engagement, but a test of everything she had learned about the integration of aerial and ground operations, about the importance of innovation in military doctrine, about the necessity of trusting competence regardless of its source. Her first missile struck with surgical precision, eliminating the command post and instantly fragmenting the coordinated enemy response. The secondary explosions suggested that her assessment of supply caches had been accurate, as ammunition stores and fuel supplies detonated in a chain reaction that shattered windows 3 blocks away. But Thorne's real innovation wasn't in the precision of her strikes. It was in her understanding of psychological warfare as a force multiplier. The sudden elimination of central command, combined with the destruction of supply lines and communication networks, created exactly the kind of chaos that transformed organized resistance into individual survival instincts. Morrison's voice carried amazement and professional admiration. Phoenix, enemy forces are withdrawing. I repeat, full enemy withdrawal in progress. How the hell did you know that would work? Thorne's response was characteristically understated. Lucky guess, Chief. But it wasn't luck, and everyone listening knew it. It was the application of tactical intelligence, innovative thinking, and the kind of calculated risk-taking that separated exceptional military professionals from merely competent ones. Colonel Valdez's voice carried satisfaction mixed with curious respect. Phoenix 1-7 returned to base for debriefing. Outstanding work. Major Harrison's silence spoke volumes. His objections had been professionally appropriate and doctrinally sound, but they had also been wrong. The mission had succeeded not because of adherence to established procedures, but because someone had been willing to challenge those procedures when circumstances demanded innovation. As Thorne turned her aircraft toward home, she reflected on the morning's events with the kind of analytical detachment that had become her trademark. The mission had been successful, the SEAL team was safe, and the enemy force had been neutralized with minimal resources and no friendly casualties. But more importantly, she had demonstrated something that went beyond individual combat effectiveness. She had proven that modern warfare required officers who could think beyond conventional limitations, who could integrate multiple tactical perspectives, and who could make critical decisions based on analysis rather than prejudice. The radio crackled with Morrison's final transmission of the mission. Phoenix 1-7, this is Phantom 2-1. Thanks for keeping us alive out here. Thorne's response was simple and professional. Just doing my job, Chief. But as she climbed toward cruising altitude, leaving the tactical complexity of ground operations behind for the clean simplicity of flight, Captain Lyra, Phoenix, Thorne understood that she had just participated in something more significant than a successful mission. She had helped write a new chapter in the evolution of military doctrine, one that would influence tactical thinking for years to come. The sky ahead was clear, the aircraft was performing flawlessly, and the radio chatter had settled into the comfortable routine of post-mission procedures. But in the quiet moments between radio calls, Thorne allowed herself a moment of satisfaction that went beyond professional accomplishment. She had proven, once again, that competence spoke louder than convention, that innovation could triumph over tradition, and that the future of military operations belonged to those who were willing to challenge the limitations of the past. The flight back to base was smooth, routine, and utterly unremarkable. But for everyone who had monitored the morning's radio transmissions, it represented a journey from skepticism to respect, from conventional thinking to tactical innovation, from the limitations of established doctrine to the possibilities of adaptive leadership. By the time Captain Thorne's F-16 touched down on the runway at Forward Operating Base Kestrel, the story of her intervention had already begun spreading through the informal communication networks that connected military personnel across operational theaters, not as gossip or rumor, but as the kind of professional recognition that transcends rank, gender, and institutional prejudice. In the debriefing room, Colonel Valdez studied the tactical reports with the satisfaction of a commander who had learned to recognize exceptional performance regardless of its source. Major Harrison sat quietly, his professional objections overcome by the undeniable success of the mission. Captain Rivera was already incorporating Thorne's tactical insights into updated intelligence assessments. But the real measure of the morning's success wasn't reflected in official reports or commendation recommendations. It was evident in the subtle shift in professional relationships, the quiet acknowledgement that competence had once again proven itself more valuable than conformity, and the growing understanding that future military operations would require the kind of innovative thinking that Captain Lyra Phoenix Thorne had demonstrated when conventional doctrine proved insufficient. The story would be retold in training seminars, analyzed in tactical reviews, and remembered as an example of how individual initiative could transform impossible situations into achievable objectives. But for those who had lived through it, the morning's events represented something more personal and more profound. They had witnessed the emergence of a new model of military leadership, one that valued analytical intelligence over institutional tradition, tactical innovation over procedural conformity, and individual competence over collective prejudice. As the debriefing session concluded and personnel began dispersing to their regular duties, the question wasn't whether Captain Thorne's methods would be incorporated into standard tactical doctrine. The question was how quickly the military establishment could adapt its thinking to accommodate the kind of innovative approaches that modern warfare increasingly demanded. The afternoon briefing brought news that confirmed the morning's tactical assessment. Intelligence analysis of the neutralized enemy position revealed a significant weapons cache, communication equipment suggesting coordination with regional insurgent networks, and evidence of planning for operations far beyond the scope of local harassment activities. Captain Rivera's supplementary report painted a picture of an enemy stronghold that had been operating undetected for months, possibly coordinating attacks across multiple provinces and serving as a key node in a larger insurgent network. The facility's destruction represented not just a tactical victory, but a strategic disruption of enemy operations that would have implications far beyond the immediate operational area. Morrison's SEAL team had returned to base with detailed intelligence gathered during their extended observation period, intelligence that would prove invaluable in understanding enemy operational methods and identifying similar facilities in other regions. Their 48-hour ordeal had produced actionable information that would inform future operations across the entire theater. But the most significant outcome wasn't reflected in intelligence reports or tactical assessments. It was evident in the changing dynamics of professional respect and operational confidence that had begun to permeate the entire command structure. Colonel Valdez found himself reconsidering not just the specific tactical decisions of the morning, but the broader implications of adaptive leadership in an operational environment that increasingly demanded innovation over tradition. The success of Thorne's intervention had demonstrated that effective military operations required commanders who could recognize competence regardless of its source and integrate diverse tactical perspectives into cohesive operational strategies. Major Harrison, to his professional credit, had begun his own process of reassessment. His objections to Thorne's intervention had been doctrinally appropriate and operationally sound, according to established procedures. But they had also been tactically incorrect, and Harrison understood that effective military leadership required the humility to learn from experience rather than the rigidity to defend established positions regardless of their effectiveness. For Captain Rivera, the morning's events had provided a masterclass in the integration of multiple intelligence sources. Thorne's aerial observations, Morrison's ground-based reconnaissance, and her own communication analysis had combined to produce a tactical picture far more accurate than any single source could have provided. It was a lesson in collaborative intelligence gathering that would influence her analytical methods for years to come. But the real transformation was evident in the subtle changes in how personnel throughout the base began to view Captain Lyra Phoenix Thorne. The casual dismissal that had characterized many professional interactions was replaced by the kind of respectful attention typically reserved for officers whose competence had been proven under the most demanding circumstances. The change wasn't dramatic or immediately obvious. Military culture evolved slowly, and individual attitudes shifted through accumulated experience rather than sudden revelation. But those who paid attention to the nuances of professional relationships could detect the difference in how Thorne's tactical assessments were received, how her operational insights were considered, and how her presence in briefings was acknowledged. The evening briefing brought additional confirmation of the morning's success. Signals intelligence had detected significant disruption in enemy communication networks across the region, suggesting that the neutralized facility had indeed been serving as a coordination hub for multiple insurgent operations. Satellite imagery showed abandoned positions and movement patterns consistent with a broader enemy withdrawal from previously held areas. More importantly, the tactical methods demonstrated during the morning's operation were already being incorporated into training scenarios for other units. The integration of aerial reconnaissance with ground-based intelligence, the use of behavioral analysis to identify command structures, and the application of precision strikes to achieve psychological as well as tactical effects were all being studied as potential improvements to standard operational doctrine. Colonel Valdez's final report to higher command would emphasize not just the successful completion of the mission, but the innovative tactical approaches that had made that success possible. He understood that military effectiveness depended not just on following established procedures, but on continuously evolving those procedures to meet the changing demands of operational reality. The report would make special mention of Captain Thorne's analytical contributions, not as an exception to standard practices, but as an example of the kind of tactical thinking that modern warfare increasingly required. It would recommend that her methods be studied, adapted, and incorporated into training programs designed to develop the next generation of military leaders. But for Thorne herself, the evening brought a different kind of satisfaction. As she completed her post-flight checks and prepared her aircraft for the next day's operations, she reflected on the morning's events with the quiet pride of someone who had proven her competence under the most demanding circumstances. The skepticism that had greeted her tactical assessments had been replaced by professional respect. The dismissive attitudes that had characterized many of her interactions with ground personnel had evolved into collaborative relationships based on demonstrated effectiveness rather than institutional prejudice. More importantly, she had contributed to the development of tactical innovations that would improve the safety and effectiveness of future operations. The integration of aerial and ground-based intelligence, the use of behavioral analysis to identify high-value targets, and the application of precision strikes to achieve maximum tactical effect with minimum resources were all methods that would save lives and accomplish missions in future operations. As the base settled into the quiet routines of evening duty rotations, the story of the morning's mission began its transformation from immediate tactical success to enduring professional legacy. In officer clubs and enlisted quarters, in training classrooms and operational briefings. The events would be discussed, analyzed, and remembered as an example of how individual competence and innovative thinking could overcome conventional limitations. The story would evolve in the telling, as military stories always did. Details would be refined, tactical insights would be emphasized, and the broader lessons would be extracted for application to future challenges. But the core narrative would remain consistent. When conventional doctrine proved insufficient, tactical innovation had provided the solution. For Captain Lyra Phoenix Thorne, the morning had represented not just a successful mission, but confirmation of everything she had learned about the importance of analytical thinking, tactical flexibility, and the courage to challenge established limitations when circumstances demanded innovation. The weeks that followed brought a series of subtle but significant changes to the operational environment at Forward Operating Base Kestrel. Training exercises began incorporating scenarios that emphasized the integration of aerial and ground-based intelligence. Briefings included discussions of behavioral analysis techniques for identifying enemy command structures. Mission planning sessions routinely considered unconventional tactical approaches alongside established doctrine. Captain Rivera found herself consulting with Thorne on intelligence assessments that could benefit from aerial observation and behavioral analysis. Morrison's SEAL team began coordinating more closely with air support elements, recognizing the tactical advantages that came from integrating multiple operational perspectives. Even Major Harrison began acknowledging the value of tactical flexibility in rapidly evolving operational situations. But the most significant change was evident in the growing professional network that began to develop around innovative tactical thinking. Officers from other units sought opportunities to discuss operational challenges with personnel who had demonstrated the ability to find creative solutions to conventional problems. Training exchanges brought visitors who wanted to understand how aerial reconnaissance could be integrated more effectively with ground operations. Colonel Valdez found himself fielding inquiries from higher command about the tactical methods that had produced such significant operational success with minimal resources. The morning's mission had become a case study in adaptive leadership, innovative tactics, and the importance of recognizing competence regardless of its source. For Thorne, the professional recognition was gratifying, but the real satisfaction came from understanding that her contributions were influencing the development of more effective tactical doctrine. The integration of diverse operational perspectives, the emphasis on analytical thinking over procedural conformity, and the recognition that modern warfare required continuous innovation rather than rigid adherence to established methods, were all concepts that would improve military effectiveness for years to come. The story of how even the SEAL snipers had failed, and then she had silenced the entire enemy unit alone, became more than just an account of tactical success. It became a narrative about the evolution of military thinking, the importance of recognizing competence in all its forms, and the necessity of adapting established doctrine to meet the changing demands of modern warfare. In the quiet moments between missions, as she prepared her aircraft for the next day's operations or reviewed intelligence assessments for upcoming tasks, Captain Lyra Phoenix Thorne understood that her contribution to that morning's success represented something larger than individual achievement. She had helped demonstrate that effective military operations required leaders who could think beyond conventional limitations, integrate diverse tactical perspectives, and make critical decisions based on analytical assessment rather than institutional prejudice. She had proven that competence spoke louder than tradition, that innovation could triumph over conformity, and that the future of military effectiveness belonged to those who were willing to challenge the established order when circumstances demanded new approaches. The sky above Forward Operating Base Kestrel remained the same clear blue expanse that had witnessed the morning's tactical triumph, But for everyone who had participated in or observed those events, it had become something more, a symbol of the unlimited possibilities that emerged when conventional limitations were replaced by innovative thinking, when individual competence was recognized and valued, and when the courage to challenge established doctrine was rewarded with operational success. The legacy of that morning would continue to influence tactical thinking, training methods, and operational planning for years to come. But its most important contribution was the demonstration that military effectiveness depended not on rigid adherence to established procedures, but on the continuous evolution of those procedures through the application of analytical intelligence, tactical innovation, and adaptive leadership. And in the end, that was the most important lesson of all, that the future belonged to those who were willing to look beyond the limitations of the past and imagine the possibilities of what could be achieved when competence, creativity, and courage combined to transform impossible challenges into achievable objectives.